Let's start with a very basic, very fundamental truth. Martin Luther King Jr. was not a capitalist. By the end of his life, he might not have been a Marxist. He was probably something of a social democrat, certainly at the very least a social democrat, keenly opposed to war and imperialism, and someone who correctly drew the connections tightly and firmly between the abuse of American apartheid, American poverty, American anti-labor policies with America's mass murder and imperialism in Vietnam. The political risk of speaking out against that war alienated him, of course, from the Johnson administration and the liberal establishment of the 1960s. Now, it's almost become its own cliche to correct the record on MLK every MLK Day. We have to remind everybody that this was not only an incredible intellect and leader, but also a political radical, one absolutely not at home with the power structures of his day, one that, as Brendan Sutton pointed out in a much smaller sort of version of this, will probably be blocked by most of the leading lights of the Democratic Party, as an example, on Twitter, and very unlikely invited to opine on MSNBC and other sort of areas of the American establishment. And no doubt the ferocious racism and conspiracy theories that he faced from the right would continue up till this day. And don't forget, Ronald Reagan was very grudging when he signed the Martin Luther King Day Jr. holiday into law, and that holiday was voted against by John McCain, Orrin Hatch, Chuck Grassley, and others. But we do need to do this every year. We need to remind everybody what the man's politics actually were, connected to and building off the civil rights revolution that he was, of course, an instrumental part of. But here is a brief montage of him talking about labor inequality and poverty.
We must also realize that the problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.
We read one day, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But if a man doesn't have a job or an income, he has neither life nor liberty and the possibility for the pursuit of happiness. He merely exists. Estimated that we spend $322,000 for each enemy we kill in Vietnam, while we spend in the so-called war on poverty in America only about $53 for each person classified as poor. The promises of the Great Society have been shot down on the battlefield of Vietnam, making the poor, white and Negro, bear the heaviest burdens both at the front and at home.
The other thing I want you to understand is this, that it didn't cost the nation one penny to integrate lunch counters. It didn't cost the nation one penny to guarantee the right to vote. But now we are dealing with issues that cannot be solved without the nation spending billions of dollars and undergoing a radical redistribution of economic power. Yes.
Of course, that was all correct. And of course, that was in the lead up to the assassination of Dr. King in Tennessee, where he was helping organize poor people's and labor campaigns in condition to a expansion of his work for civil rights. Now, we do know that in addition to very serious questions about FBI connections to his assassination, that this, of course, would be in concert with the rise of programs like COINTELPRO and the role of the FBI assassination in Black Panther leaders and other targeting by the FBI of these other groups as well. And now, this is very important because it's important to not only know exactly what we're talking about with Dr. King, but how this actually fits into a much broader American intellectual and political tradition. which is essentially African-American radicalism, socialist and otherwise, not only because it exemplified, of course, the leading edge of the battle for equal rights in this country, but also because it synchronized economic policies and conversations about labor and injustice, and it was globally oriented. W.E.B. Du Bois, in addition to being a communist, in addition to being an incredible academic in the United States, sought to draw connections between the United States and Africa. Malcolm X, in his political evolution before his assassination, had moved clearly into an anti-imperialist oriented politics, one verging towards socialism and one certainly drawing connections in liberated African nations, but also Cuba and even briefly China as well. Paul Robeson is another titan in this battle. He was an actor, attorney, football star, truly a Renaissance person in a way that's actually pretty unusual in all of American history. He was an uncompromising activist, and in his case, an uncompromising communist. Here he is in a foreshadowing, in fact, of the broader efforts that things like COINTEL would work towards. In the House Un-American Services Committee, of course, the McCarthyite project to destroy all radical Americans, not only people like Paul Robeson, but Hollywood screenwriters, State Department officials, and others. This is Robeson responding fearlessly to the committee. Matt, go ahead.
Just a brief, it's House Un-American Activities.
House Un-American, what did I say?
And Services.
And this is James.
My mistake.
And this is James Earl Jones reading the script.
And this is James Earl Jones reading the script. Paul Robeson in the House Un-American Activities Committee.
Could I be allowed to read from my statement?
Will you just tell this committee, please, while under oath, Mr. Robeson, the communists who participated in the preparation of that statement?
Oh, please. The reason I am here today, from the mouth of the State Department itself, is I should not be allowed to travel because I have struggled for the independence of the colonial peoples of Africa. The other reason I am here today, again, from the State Department and from the record of the Court of Appeals, is that when I am abroad, I speak out against injustices against the Negro people in this land. That is why I'm here. I'm not being tried for whether I'm a communist. I'm being tried for fighting for the rights of my people, who are still second-class citizens in this country, in this United States of America. My mother was born in your state, and my mother was a Quaker. My ancestors, in the time of Washington, baked bread for George Washington's troops when they crossed the Delaware. My father was a slave. I stand here struggling for the rights of my people to be full citizens in this country. And we are not. We are not in Mississippi. We are not in Montgomery, Alabama. We are not in Washington. We are nowhere. And that is why I am here today. You want to shut up every Negro who has the courage to stand up and fight for the rights of his people, for the rights of workers. And I have been on many a picket line for the steel workers too. And that's what it was. So when we reflect on MLK and we clearly assert the historical reality that this man was one of America's most important leaders in every sense of the word, and that there was actually some broad convergence between where a sort of Malcolm X project was heading in some respects, and certainly the actual radicalism of MLK, of Abernathy, of Baird Rustin, and others who were advocating a radical labor agenda in addition to the civil rights revolution. We should look at this broader activist and intellectual and political history of the United States, which exemplifies a left tradition that is all too often marginalized or, even worse, rebranded to try to prop some of the laziest narratives and capitalist affirmations of our present order. In addition to that, Mike Pence, MLK would certainly not be supporting you and your bosses.
Do the wall through legislation.
Yeah. Do the wall through legislation. That's how we can do it, through negotiation.
Both sides got to come together.
Both sides need to come to the table. That was an interesting pivot that we went through from MLK. It used to be right-wing MLK, but now Republican never Trumper MLK. Like, I'm glad that he's not apologizing for America. However, he's been very tasteless. And how he's conducted himself with a lack of decorum in the White House. Read Mitt Romney's column.
He's like the one conservative that really likes what Shepard Smith does on Fox News.
I thought Shep in the 4 o'clock block saying that Guatemalans don't have rabies was very courageous. You just enjoyed that Michael Brooks Show video, and you can get a lot more by subscribing to us here at the Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel. It's literally right there.